Clerk, you can roll.
Drum roll.
Yes.
We good to go? All right. I want to call this meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority to order. It's about 4:18 on May the 20th, 2009. Steve, are there any public comments?
No public comment.
Members, you've all seen the minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any additions, corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 4, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute an amendment to the project development agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation with an effective date of January 29th, 2009, to increase the scope of the PDA to allow the RMA to commence the procurement process for the I-10 at Loop 375, America's Interchange Project. Mr. Tejas?
Mr. Chair, before you go to Mr. Tejas, I'd like the ability to recuse myself from items 4, 5, 6, and 7. There's a potential of conflict on those items, and I filed an affidavit with the Camino Real Mobility Authority, and I have a copy of it. It's been notarized and given to Mr. Tejas. So with that, although I am present, I will not vote on, nor will I participate in any discussion on items 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Very good.
And the record will reflect your abstention. Thank you. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real.
Raymond, just 1 second.
Yes,
I noticed that when I sent the email to you concerning this, I didn't get a response.
I actually did respond. I couldn't hit the send button, but I was going to say that with a refund of all of my investment over the past 25 years of ownership of that property, that if the RMA should find it benevolent to refund to me all that investment, then I could certainly consider now at this point involving them. I did see your email, and I did respond, but I couldn't hit
Just for the board's information, I asked Mr. Tejas if Mr. Berg just donated the land, would there be any reason for him to recuse himself? No response, though. I'm sorry, Mr.
It is my understanding, though, that once we get the procurement process resolved, the possibility may exist for future participation in issues relating specifically to the connectivity of 375 and I-10.
And we are running that through our attorneys
Exactly.
currently, so we should have an opinion soon.
Very good. Go ahead,
Again,
Raymond.
for the record, Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real RMA. What we have here is a series of agenda items related to the Americas Interchange. It's Loop 375 at I-10. So we'll begin with item number 4. Item number 4 is, and actually by way of background, if you'll remember, the RMA entered into a project development agreement with TxDOT. And that project development agreement granted the RMA $2.2 million, and those funds were specifically identified for use in the preliminary work necessary for the Americas Interchange. Specifically, the RMA was charged with developing those procurement documents, reviewing the projects, going over the scope, the estimates, and all of those preliminary documents to make sure that the projects were ready to go. And that, again, was the $2.2 million. What you see before you here as item number 4 is actually the first amendment to that project development agreement, and what we're looking to do is actually expand the scope for that project development agreement. The intent is to now allow the RMA, or rather to grant access to the $2.2 million for the RMA to pursue the procurement process related to the Americas Interchange. So this is, whereas the original PDA project development agreement was drafted to do the preliminary work, we're now actually moving on to the next step, which is the procurement process, and that begins with the issuance of the RFQ and those steps. So again, item number 4 is requesting authority for the executive director to execute an amendment to the work authorization to allow access to the $2.2 million for the RMA to begin the procurement process related to the Americas Interchange.
Very good. Members, any questions?
Did the excuse me, I'm sorry. Did the original agreement in January not already give you that authority?
No, sir. The original agreement, the intent was always just to do the preliminary work, so that once, and it actually included work up to the development of the RFQ documents.
Okay.
But we weren't authorized.
To go beyond that?
That's right. We weren't authorized to actually put them on the street or begin the procurement process.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So if I understand it, Raymond, the $2.2 million, in essence, coming from TxDOT, a portion of that will be utilized in moving forward with this, and TxDOT has agreed that as we need additional funds, that they're there for us.
That is correct. The original $2.2 million amount has not changed. So what we had to do, and in fact what I sent you earlier today, unfortunately I apologize for getting to you so late, was an amended scope of services and an amended fee schedule. We had to shift the numbers around so that we could account for the procurement process. So no additional money has been allocated for these services. However, TxDOT has said that they will replenish that fund. And in fact, to that end, we are developing currently with the assistance of our GEC, who, in fact, several members are here. Should you have any questions, the GEC is actually putting together a loose timeline of when we expect the actual expenditure of those procurement funds, so that TxDOT will know way in advance when we actually need those additional dollars.
Okay. So ultimately, what's going to occur is will the Texas Transportation Commission then approve a minute order authorizing the development portion of this?
Well, actually, and in fact, in May, I believe it's already next week, at the May TTC meeting, there will be several items on the Texas Transportation Commission meeting agenda. One of them will be authorizing their executive director to actually sign this first amendment that will actually give us access to those $2.2 million. But more importantly, really, is a separate minute order that will actually grant the RMA the development authority for the Americas project, because currently to date we really don't have any authority other than the development of the preliminary work. What actually so I should stress again the importance of this minute order that's coming next week, that we anticipate approval of next week, is that the project actually becomes the RMA's project after that minute order. So that's the importance of next week.
Very good. Mr. Berry or Eduardo? Thanks for joining us.
Mr. Chairman, yes, Chuck Berry with Texas Department of Transportation.
As far as you know, are these items scheduled on the TTC's agenda?
Yes, sir.
For next week?
As far as I know, they are scheduled on the agenda for next Thursday.
That's
and we've seen copies of the draft versions of the minute order, so I'm confident that it's underway.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, any further
Nope.
discussion?
Based on that information, I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Motion carried. Item number 5, discussion and action on the
Yes, sir. For the record, Mr. Berg has abstained from that vote.
excuse me, and any abstentions?
Yes, I abstain.
Thank you.
For the record, it's important.
Discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute work authorization number 4 with PBS&J in regard to the procurement process for the I-10 at Loop 375 America's Interchange project as more fully described within the reference project development agreement between the CRRMA and the Texas Department of Transportation with an effective date of January 29, 2009, and as subsequently amended. Mr. Tejas.
As a reminder, whenever the RMA enters into an agreement with TxDOT, you generally have that one agreement on one hand. But the RMA also needs a second agreement with its GEC, and they're actually referred to as work authorizations, and that's what actually authorizes the GEC to do the work originally contemplated under the TxDOT agreement. So that's what you see before you here. However, I would note that I need to note, correct for the record, that in actuality, we're not authorizing a new, or we're not executing a new work authorization number 4. In fact, what we're doing is we're actually amending the original work authorization number 1. This relates to, as I was mentioning earlier, you've got the first project development agreement between TxDOT and the RMA. That resulted in work authorization number 1 between the GEC and the RMA. So essentially what we're doing now is amending that first work authorization to incorporate these additional procurement services.
Any questions?
I don't know if I've made that more confusing than I should have.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
I do what I can.
Good job. Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any,
Scott seconded.
any further discussion?
Abstention.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Those abstaining?
I abstain.
Okay, motion carries. Item number 6, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the CRRMA to commence the procurement process related to the I-10 at Loop 375 America's Interchange project, including but not limited to the issuance of a request for qualifications. Mr. Tejas.
Now, items number 4 and 5 dispense with the contractual requirements. Item number 6 is the actual board action that grants the RMA staff to actually begin the procurement process. So that's what we're asking in item number 6.
Any questions?
Will you be advertised for these, or how do you intend to get about?
Absolutely. In fact, if the GEC would like to discuss a little bit about the procurement process, and in fact, actually, I can touch on it briefly, and if you'd like to get into more detail, we can bring up the GEC. But essentially, with a design-build project, you'll have initially going out the RFQ, and that'll seek the interested bidders. After that, and then that hopefully will bring in a number of interested parties. At that point, we'll shortlist them, and then you go back with the request for detailed proposals. So at that point, then you're actually reviewing the proposal. So it's a 2-step.
How wide a net are you going to cover in your request for proposals? Local, state, federal,
At least from-
national,
Yeah.
lunar?
For the record, Mike Bierma with PBS&J. Typically, we'll advertise both in local papers, but also place them in the Texas Register. And then also, of course, now that your website is up and running, that'll serve to be a useful tool through the procurement process.
That's what I was looking for.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions, Mike?
No.
Is there a motion to approve item number 6?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? None. If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Those abstaining?
So I abstain.
Okay, motion carries. Item number 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a project development agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for the development, design, and construction of the I-10 at Loop 375 America's Interchange project. Mr. Tejas.
This item, I'm actually going to request that you delete it. As I
Okay.
mentioned before, you have the first project development agreement, which dealt mainly with planning and now also includes procurement. The second project development agreement actually goes into the details of the construction portion. We're not at the point where we have a document that is close enough that I was prepared to bring it forward and ask for approval. So I'm asking that we delete this, and I'll bring it back once that agreement is closer to final form, rather.
Very good. Is there a motion?
Just one quick question. How does this differ from number 1? Number 4?
The initial project development agreement, again, is related strictly to preliminary pre-development work. So that's where we're going out. We're looking at the cost estimates. We're looking at estimated delivery times. We're looking at all those sorts of things. And now, again, through the amendment, we're also involved in the procurement process. The second project development agreement actually looks to the construction and the development details. So that is going to lay out what the RMA will be responsible for and what, in fact, TxDOT will be responsible for as well.
Good, in the first PDA, it articulated all of this, or are we going to have to do every time there's...
Well, it could
things
have.
We're going to have to do.
But if you remember, the original PDA was granted because we needed startup funds. So that's why we needed the original project development agreement.
Mr. Berry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chuck Berry with TxDOT. In addition to what Raymond has talked to you about, I wanted to emphasize that the reason for separating these two goes a little bit even beyond what Raymond had said. We are trying to maximize the eligibility of developing this project under the Recovery Act, the Federal Recovery Act. We don't have the authority to do that yet, and we're trying to control the costs pre-approval to do that. So that also helps us by separating those two agreements. This first part of the work is being funded by TxDOT, and the second part of the work, after we receive what's called a Federal Letter of Obligation Authority, an official document from the Federal Highway Administration allowing us to proceed. At that point, we become eligible for reimbursement of those expenses. And those two PDAs are going to assist with that process. And Raymond may not have been privy to as much of that as what me and my staff have been working with at TxDOT, working through Raymond.
Very good. Any questions, gentlemen?
Did you want this tabled or deleted?
Deleted, please, and I'll bring it back once that second agreement is ready.
Move to delete? Item number 7.
There's a second? Second. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor of the deletion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Any abstentions?
I abstain on that vote.
Very good. Motion carries. Item number 8, really before we go any further, I just want to commend Chuck, you and Eduardo and your staff, as well as the TxDOT administration in Austin and all the other various help that we've been given by TxDOT. It would have been virtually impossible for us to move this quickly and accomplish this much in such a short period of time without your assistance. So we just very, very, very much appreciate all the efforts that you and your staff and TxDOT administration as well as the commission have given us, and their support has been tantamount to whatever successes we've had.
Thank you for that recognition, Chairman Hahn. If I could add to that, in some of the staff meetings that we've had over at TxDOT, we've made note that we do have an additional resource. He's sitting over here to my left in being able to get this work done, and he's been tremendous. Your executive director has been right on top of things and even reminded us on a time or two on the next step that's needed. So I think it's been very much a teamwork effort. It's 15-1, but your one is a big one, and we really appreciate Raymond's support through that. And he conveys to us that this board has been really supportive, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good. Well, just wanted you to know. Okay, item number 8, discussion and action on board resolutions to adopt the CRRMA policies and documents and to authorize the execution of the same. 8A, Raymond? Excuse me, Mr. Tejas.
Yes, sir. 8A deals with the disadvantaged business enterprise policy statement. As you may remember, at the last board meeting, this body adopted TxDOT's DBE program. What we didn't do, though, was adopt the policy statement. So that's what you find in your backup materials today. And I should mention also, because it relates also to B, the DBE policy statement, a DBE program deals specifically with federally funded programs, projects.
So if it's TxDOT funded, these don't apply?
That's correct, and that's what 8B will cover.
Okay.
Any questions?
Quick question, how about if it's city? Do we have to have one for city, county, state, and feds or anything?
No, sir, the BOPP will cover anything that is non-federal.
Got it, thanks.
Any additional discussion?
None at all.
Is there a motion to approve same?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded?
Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number B,
As I mentioned,
8B, excuse me.
As I mentioned, the Business Opportunity Program and Policy is intended to cover any of those projects and programs that are non-federally funded. Incidentally, I should mention both 8A and both 8A and B have been reviewed by our attorneys and are in line with what most of the other RMAs are doing throughout the state.
In fact, some of them aren't even to this point.
That's
Is that
correct. Actually, we're a little bit ahead of the curve on a couple of these.
Any discussion? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Not, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 9, discussion and action on the Executive Director's Report. Mr. Tejas?
Included in your backup, you'll find a status of RMA legislative issues for the 81st legislative session. This is drafted by our counsel, Brian Cassidy and Lori Winland. As you know, they cover those issues for us. If you remember back before the session began, the RMA actually adopted legislative priorities. And what they've done here is they've broken out the various bills as they relate to our priorities. So this is really something for you all to take back. And of course, this is changing almost by the hour, but this is a very good snapshot of what we're looking at to date.
Are we contracted with Lock, Liddell, and Moore to, are they remunerated for this?
Yes, sir.
And it's a contract that we approved as part of our previous.
Yes, sir. The original agreement included legislative services for us. And actually what they do, when they're monitoring the legislation, they actually spread those costs over their other clients that they're handling this for as well, which is virtually all of the RMAs with the exception of one, I believe.
Well, I was reading through these, and these are very specific to the CRRMA, to us.
Yes, sir.
And so that's the reason I asked the question.
Well, the cost, and in fact, it was a joke, but when we were speaking about this particular...
Don't say that for the record. Okay?
Right.
Because I won't-
Well, let me rephrase that. When I was discussing this...
It was of great community benevolence, generosity.
When I was speaking to the attorney who was drafting this for us, she mentioned that the costs for this particular document, because of the nature of it, are spread across all the RMAs. And of course, the other RMAs will get a copy of this as well, so, because we're all
Of course, it may mean that they just charge every one of the RMAs.
I know, that's the reason. Well, we do need to, I think we do need to acknowledge the great work that Lock, Liddell, Moore is doing to monitor tons of legislation that is specific to our particular requirements here in El Paso, and I think that it's a very commendable document, and obviously we have obstacles and we have wonderful rewards we can reap from this next legislature.
I would mention also this is a very abbreviated version. I mean, the regular documents that they send out are reams long, because these are obviously not all the bills that they're watching for us, but these are the ones that are of most importance to us because they tie back to our legislative priorities. But they've been very helpful.
I think one of the critical things also, particularly at this point in the session, if there are any number of amendments, it happens almost not by the hour, by the minute in some cases. Anyone that was watching some of the legislative meetings, there were around 200 amendments placed on House Bill 300.
Yes, sir.
And just the mountain of paperwork to try to keep up with the amendments and the amendments to the amendments, and it's almost crazy.
I might add something. Do you mind?
I don't mind at all.
An amendment?
No, not an amendment, but Representative Pickett today publicly stated that he's not opposed to removing the amendment to House Bill 300 regarding the CRRMA and the City of El Paso.
That's correct. And in fact, in your backup, you'll see a copy of a letter that the chair sent out that related specifically to that concern.
Right.
Do we need, since it went out in the name of the RMA, I'm suggesting that would it not be prudent for us to endorse that letter?
You certainly could. The way that it was drafted, though, was with that concern in mind. It was written from the chair.
I saw that. But I would like to make a motion that
Certainly.
at this point, all of us on the RMA endorse the communication from our chair to this particular representative, and really not just Representative Conroso, but also to whatever other authority might be influenced by the action which we are in opposition to. And I want to commend the chair, and I imagine you had something to do with that as well, for acting immediately to try to assuage what I would have considered to be absolutely wrongful legislation, detrimental to the benefit of El Paso as a community, and most importantly to this RMA. So the motion is to endorse the communication that was written by our chair.
Are you going to do that with every piece of letter he writes out?
If he writes it in the while we're not in session and it represents us, and he's doing it in his own name, and we believe that what he's doing really should be in all of our names, yes. The answer is yes. And so at this point, I will endorse. My motion is to endorse this letter.
I'd like to just amend it, if you may, just to state that I think it was Senator Corona, not a representative.
I'm sorry. Did I say Representative? I meant Senator Crow.
And
Thank you.
And I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
Can we actually act on it? It's not even on the agenda?
Actually, yes, it is. It's
under
it's included in the legislative update, and if you note, item 9 is discussion action on legislative update.
Any further discussion? Just so you're aware, this would have been brought before the board, but I think the Senate Transportation Committee met
This morning.
this morning.
Exactly.
So
Understood.
in order to make sure, I believe also the mayor wrote a similar letter spelling out
correct.
the city's position. So, and I think just for some clarification, and Mr. Tesh, you may need to help me with this, but I think the original amendment was not permissive. It specified that the city council and the mayor would be the board of the RMA. It wasn't a matter of whether they voted to do it or not. It was a matter that they would just become the board. Is that correct?
That's correct. The House Bill 300 was amended over Thursday evening, Friday morning, and then came back again Monday morning in the House. First, I guess that was the third reading on Monday. On Friday was the original item, and that was not permissive. On Monday, it was amended to become permissive.
Okay.
Has he pulled it out altogether?
Well, it
I read something
stands.
today that he had basically said, I've pulled it all, it's not even an issue anymore.
Well,
Whichever
it's
choice.
still in, the House passed it as is with the permissive item, so that has to stay. So it came over to the Senate with that provision included. Now, what he stated to the press is that he will not object to its removal in the Senate or elsewhere.
Right.
What's your when you say he, you're talking Chairman Pickett?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
correct? Okay.
So the motion is before you. We need to vote on it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
One question before we move away from this.
Yes, sir.
Just curious, what is the composure of the current MPO? What's the composition of elected versus non-elected officials? Do you know offhand?
I do not.
It's not important, it's just that obviously he put a 75% in there. I just wonder where he was coming from.
We're conferring. There's approximately 25 members of the El Paso MPO. There are approximately 5, maybe 6 that are not elected, myself included. Ms. Chang, who's in the audience, is also on the board, and she is not elected. Ms. Adalto.
Airport director?
Ms. Chang took the airport director's position. And
Sun Metro?
Sun Metro, the county engineer, Robert Rivera. And Oh, and then Alvin Dominguez out of New Mexico, the New Mexico DOT District Engineer. So I think I've given you all the
All the
non-elected.
state reps, the state senator, the mayor, 3 city representatives, and the mayors of the outlying communities, county commissioner of Donna Ana County, and the mayor of Sunland Park. Is that, so it's pretty much, at this point, it's a majority of the,
It's a strong majority of elected officials, and that's the intent, so for it to be a body of,
We're close to the 75% that he's looking for.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
One of these things he wants to limit the MPO to 75-25%. The composure,
Oh,
and I was wondering where he was coming from with that.
yeah, that's approximately correct for the El Paso
We're pretty
area.
close to it already, aren't we?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm just curious.
and I believe the Senate version has 50%.
50%? Okay.
Any other questions of Mr. Berry? Okay. Any other items as far as the legislative update?
No, sir, not for me.
Okay. Members, any other discussion? 9B,
9B is just, as you all know, and I've sent out an email to the board, and we've also sent an email out to our email list to let the public know. In fact, if we could pull up the website, the RMA website is up and running. We've been hearing some good things about it. Here you see it on your screen. So we've got everything on there from the history of the RMA, any procurements that we have outstanding will be listed there, the existing documents, contacts, that's important too, so you all should be getting some emails here soon.
could we go to the contacts section so that Ralph could see his picture?
Yeah, please. Got it. Thank you. I feel so much better now.
There he is. So I wanted to bring this up in a public session so that the public was made aware that this additional tool is available.
Very good. Any questions?
Because
It's
he's
a
old.
glamour shot.
Hey, Raymond, I just curious. I know that you got the great graphics of the loop in there. Will we be updating those as we go forward so that it shows the progress?
Yes, sir.
I hate for us to 6 months from now still show the same pictures.
Right, and the individual that's helping us, and in fact, I should mention, Ingo Thomas is the individual from the IT department here with the city that's providing these services to us, and I have to tell you, I have to thank him personally. He's done a great job. I've asked him that specifically because we don't want the RMA site to look the same every time you come to it. So he says
Neither does Mr. Burnett.
So
Okay.
yes,
Yeah, because you
That's
got
your
a lot of
question.
photos in and they're great, but.
And in fact, I would mention also the only page that really isn't updated yet is the projects page, and I'm putting those together. TxDOT has been a great help. Marty Boyd has been providing a lot of documents for us so that we can start uploading our projects on there. And you can actually see the slideshow shows a number of photos that, in fact, I should mention also Jose Solis, who runs the media section here for the city, took most, if not all, of those photos. And in fact, he's the one responsible for those photos in the annual report and the strategic plan as well. So I want to thank him as well. Anyhow, again, this is just to let the public know that we're online and we're ready to receive emails, and we're out there.
Very good. 9C,
This also is just for the public. Each of you have been provided with several copies of the annual report. If you need additional copies, let me know. We have plenty. For the public, we've brought a number of annual reports, of the copies here for the public if anyone's interested. The annual report as well as the strategic plan are actually both on the website already. So if you don't need a hard copy, you can get it electronically. We're trying to get very transparent and trying to have a large presence on the internet. So this is in furtherance of that. Actually, incidentally, I would also mention, you'll note one item should be in your packet as well. A letter in response. I should mention, actually, with the strategic plan and also with this annual report, we provided copies to the elected officials here in the area. We provided copies to all of the state representatives, the state senator, all of the city elected officials and the county elected officials as well. We provided copies to the TxDOT district office as well as the Metropolitan Planning Organization and for each of their members as well. So we're trying to make sure that everyone has a copy that wants one. And again, if you hear any requests, let me know, and we can send out some additional copies.
Very good. Okay,
For the record, Mr. Tejas, has there been any progress made to the reappointment and appointment of vacancies on the RMA?
I have not heard of any progress. I mentioned it to a couple of the council members. We were speaking about that fairly recently, and I mentioned it to them. They threw out some names that they were, I believe they were going to run up to the mayor to see if the mayor was amenable to the appointments.
I think some of what has been happening is some of the mayor's staff has been very busy the last couple of months. But having said that, I think there's some progress.
And what are the positions up in Tanny Mine? Who else?
J.O.
And J.O.
Stewart.
You know, as long as you guys keep serving in extended terms, you don't get your pay. You're reduced to zero, so just so you know.
I've been getting mine.
Yeah, right. Just for the record.
Yeah, that was a joke for the record, okay? To quote Mr. Tejas earlier.
Raymond, I think we have a pretty big event coming up here on the 29th. I know Mr. Burnett is here. Chuck, we have that in progress. Can you kind of give us a little bit of an update on that? Is that appropriate? I mean, it's not a line item on the agenda, but it is for informational purposes, Raymond. Nothing we're going to act on?
Mr. Chairman, Chuck Berry with TxDOT. Yes, we have, working with your staff, all of your staff, we have
100% of our staff?
100% of your staff is actively engaged in this event. Come May 29, your contractor, who's working on the Spur 601, our contractor together, the partners, the three of us, has informed us that they're ready to open a major segment of Spur 601 between Global Reach Boulevard and Loop 375. We're going to acknowledge that with a press event. All of you will be chairing that event, and with plenty of support from all of your staff and TxDOT. And I think the Abrams team said that they would go along with it. No, that's for the record. They were fully in support. On the 29th at 1:30 p.m., we're scheduling a press conference, and a lot of people are invited. Our developer, Abrams Construction LLP, is telling us they'll be prepared. It appears that everything will be ready, so we're scheduled for that event on 29th of May, 1:30 p.m. The state delegation is going to be represented by the senator and Chairman Pickett. Mayor Cook will be in attendance, and I believe just within the last few hours, Congressman Reyes has accepted and said he would be there. So, and the general, and also said, General Bloomberg had said he would be at the event. So everyone's anxious. This is a major segment, and I think if I recollect from the early negotiations, Mr. Burnett, that with what we will be opening between what was opened last summer on Global Reach Boulevard, the extension and connection into Fort Bliss, together with this segment of Spur 601, that represents the only portion of the project that we would have been able to construct on our own. The rest of the construction represents everything else that came along with the unsolicited private pass-through toll proposal that the RMA is financing, that TxDOT is the owner of, and that J.D. Abrams is the developer for. Do I remember that correctly? Yeah. So with what we're opening, that
in your rough estimation, that one section that's being opened, based on, you said the funding capabilities that we had, what would you estimate if we had not done this in this manner that it would have taken time-wise to build that 7.2?
I would probably have to provide you two estimates of time. One, a couple of years ago, what we thought it would take, and today what we think it would take, because I think those represent two very different pictures, windows into the future. A couple of years ago, we were saying that in order for us to construct this ourselves, we're talking about this work being beyond our 11-year plan at TxDOT, and something more like 15 to 25 years out to be able to finish the entire construction at best.
And cost to the public.
Cost to the public, because now we're waiting that time cost of money and building it at an inflated cost sometime in the future. That's correct. And today, I'd have to say it's well beyond 20 and maybe even beyond a 30-year reach unless we had some sort of very innovative financial plan to deliver the work.
Was there any methodology that this could have been accomplished without basically the partnership between the RMA, TxDOT, and Abrams? I mean, was TxDOT able to do this type of project just on their own?
We have the capability to do the work. The project would have had to secure statewide Transportation Commission approval, and they would have had to front the nearly $300 million construction cost estimate that TxDOT had for the construction work back in just year before last.
What would the likelihood of that been to accomplish?
Not very likely.
Okay.
Not for, let's see, I started at TxDOT when I was 12. It would have been really tough. It would have been a really tough sale, and especially for that amount of money up front, doing a design bid build where you have to have that money in the bank in order to proceed with construction. The pass-through has allowed us to spread that cost over several years in the future and build the project now at deflated present costs, and instead of inflated future costs somewhere in the future.
Very good.
The only name that you inadvertently left out, and I'm hopeful he'll be there because he certainly deserves the recognition, is Commissioner Houghton.
Oh, definitely. And yes, the commissioner told me he would be
Have we
there.
invited him?
You did, sir. You instructed me to invite him, if I can recall.
Very good. Thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Mr. Burnett, you know, we don't want you coming all the way to this meeting and not get a chance to tell us that, you know, when the last discussion that I had with you is I believe that you might have been ready a day or two before this, but in all sincerity, I think that everything that you've indicated is that this section is on budget, on time. You're very comfortable with where you are at this point. Is that correct?
Bill Burnett, J.D. Abrams. I'm very comfortable. I didn't know Chuck was going to spend $300 million because we're getting paid less than that.
You didn't find out.
Our price is a little bit less than Chuck's number, but we're ready on Friday, the 29th, as Mr. Berry said, at 1:30, under the Loop 375 bridges. You need to come in from Montana. We discourage Chuck having buses out there on your behalf to escort the people through. We want everybody in an individual vehicle, so everybody gets counted because we're counting live traffic. 2 buses doesn't work. You know, if you live on, wherever you live, wherever you're going in El Paso, tell all your friends, be sure to drive through the spur. No, it's, Abrams is very pleased to be able to open this. We've met our milestone for opening this. The Army will actually open the new Constitution Harmon Gate the following Sunday on May 31st. Should be a lot of traffic out there then. And we met with for the rest of the board, we met with Chairman Hahn and Raymond about 2 weeks ago in TxDOT, and we've worked through the mechanism to see, once the traffic's counted, how do we ensure that you get your money in time? And I think working with Sergio Garcia from Mr. Berry's staff, we've pretty much worked all that out. And for Raymond's information, revised flow charts will be coming out shortly from Mr. Garcia for y'all's review. It's been a great partnership. We still have a couple more openings to go through, but we're looking forward to this one.
Well, we certainly appreciate you as a partner.
Well,
you guys have done a great job.
all of us in Abrams, we love El Paso. So.
Very good.
Thank you.
If I could, I would note, although I'm not your attorney, if I was, I would note that Mr. Abrams and Mr. Berry were speaking under the public comments item of the agenda.
Very good. So we moved public comments to the last item on the agenda, is
That's
that
correct.
correct? Okay. Does any action need to be made? Okay.
None.
Very good. Any other business?
No.
If not, we're adjourned.
Thank you.